You're listening to the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.
We're coming up to the end of the fourth chapter of Bava Batra, and the Mishnah is going to surprise us. And so just in order just to temper your surprise or manage your surprise, before jumping into the Mishnah, I wanted to jump into an episode in Masechet Kala, which is one of the minor tractates of the Talmud. And it has a story about Rabbi Tarfon. Now, Rabbi Tarfon is an idealistic first century rabbi. He remembers the temple before it was destroyed. So he spans the destruction. He's a Kohen, and he is, well, we'll see, he's very wealthy. Amru alav al Rabbi Tarfon shaya ashir gadol. He's a wealthy man. He owns many lands. But apparently he doesn't give to the poor. So one day Rabbi Akiva met him and said to him, Rabbi, Rudsonech she'ekach lo ir achat o shtayim. One day Rabbi Akiva met him and said to him, Master, would you like me to purchase one or two cities for you? Purchase one or two cities. Gosh, it seems as if in the time of the Mishnah, perhaps maybe today, for example, Cadogan Estates in London owns most of Knightsbridge, or the Duke of Westminster. Westminster Estate owns most of Westminster. It seems as though in those days, one might own a city and then be able to rent out the property to the residents. So you could go out and buy one or two cities. The colleges of Oxford and Cambridge were said to own land between Oxford and Cambridge such that you could go from one to the other without leaving their land. So you could purchase a city in the time of the Mishnah. And of course, to finish this story, he gives Rabbi Akiva 4,000 dinars. Rabbi Akiva takes it, but of course gives it to the poor. So that's our story. But we can buy a city. And that's where the Mishnah picks up. Someone who sells a town, sells a city. And what are we going to find? Well, we've been dealing with a sequence of Mishnayot that all begin with the word hamocher, someone who sells. And they all, the universal theme is that anything fixed is included, regardless of, anything fixed is included unless it's specified otherwise in the contract. And anything movable is not included, again, unless it's specified. So we've seen this pattern before. And we're going to move, as the chapter closes, actually from the city to the field. So we began with a house and the cistern and the cellar and whether those were included. We're going to move up. We went through the courtyard. We're now at the city. We'll close on the field, and then we'll come back in some way to the house. So there is a literary structure to this chapter, and we're now at the city. So someone sells a town. Machar batim borot shichim umarot, marchatziot, shavakot, beit avadim, ubeit hashlachim, aval lo et ha-mitaltelim. Someone who sells a town. He just says, oh yeah, I'm selling you this town. He doesn't specify. He sold basically everything fixed. The houses, the cisterns, the trenches, the caves, the bathhouses, the dovecotes. We've seen all of these things. The olive presses. Beit HaShlachim, these are probably the irrigated fields. Maybe these are the parks. We'll see later, we'll talk a bit about fields outside town. But these are probably the parks. You know, let's say the neighborhood parks, which are irritated and for the enjoyment of the residents of the city. He sold everything, but not movable property. Movable property is not included. If he said it and all that it is in it, even if cattle and slaves were in it, they are all sold. Really interesting that you can contract to sell movable property, even that might seemingly belong to somebody else. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, "Hamucher es ha'ir machar es ha'santer." If someone sells a town, he's also sold the santer. Now, this is a very interesting word, santer. By the way, it sounds like our word century, which is probably coming from the Latin. And it's clearly not a Hebrew word, by the way. I mean, you can tell from the tet, santer, it's a samach tet. You can tell from the samach and the tet, it's not a Hebrew word. He sells the santer. Does he sell the town watchman? Well, many commentators say he sold the watchman, but again, we find this difficult to believe. How can you sell a watchman? Maybe this is the watchman's hut that the watchman sits in. Interesting that Jastrow, the writer of the dictionary of the Talmud, has two meanings for santer. Meaning one is the watchman, the guardsman. And by the way, he quotes our Mishnah. He says if one sells a township, he sells with it the santer. And he suggests that this watchman is a slave and is effectively bought to guard the city. And then he gives definition two. He says the guarded land outside the township. This seems to be land outside the town that's guarded. That's why it reminds us of the word for central. And maybe that makes a bit more sense to us. We've said that by default, that the Beit Shlachim, the gardens inside the town, are included in the sale. Maybe Rabban Shimon Gamliel is referring to fields directly outside the town, which are under the town's guardianship. Maybe, but we're not sure, and the commentators don't agree. From the city, then, so we've gone from a house to a city. Now we're going to go outside the city. Someone who sells a field. So we can see the literary structure here. We've gone from the domestic to the agricultural. Someone who sells a field has also sold the stones that are necessary for it. These are probably stones which are fencing. And the canes in a vineyard that are necessary to it. Remember that in order to grow vines, we need to hold them upwards and sideways on canes. You can see this today if you go to France, that a lot of the work of a vineyard is about arranging the vines hanging up and hanging sideways so they grow properly. So we need canes for a vineyard. And the crop which is still fixed to the ground, i.e. the crop which is still growing, it hasn't been harvested. So again, following the theme of the city, we can see that we're including in the sale something which is fixed to it. And a fence or a thicket. Mechitza usually means a fence, but perhaps it means a thicket here. Some fence or thicket of reeds which covers less than a quarter carved space of ground. In other words, some small area which is enclosed off in the field, or maybe a small place where reeds grow. That's just included. It's not significant. It's not significant enough to be contracted separately. And the watchman's hut, which is not made with clay, and ungrafted carob trees. It seems as though you have to graft a carob tree to make it productive. And of course, we do the same with any fruit tree nowadays. You have to graft to make it productive. The et betulat shikma, and the virgin of the sycamore. Betulat shikma is basically a young sycamore. So none of these things have any monetary value particularly. So they're included in the field. And then, as the chapter will then close with a long discussion about what is not included in the field, and that discussion will then refer back to the beginning of our chapter. So, in other words, we're very close to ending the chapter, and we'll see that it has a arch-like structure where the beginning and the end mirror each other, and we'll deal with that when we next meet.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.